Good morning and welcome to the Daily Light Devotion. I hope all of you have had a wonderful Monday and looking forward to today, that is the 21st of July. Today we're going to look at Psalms 34 and 35 in the Old Testament, seeing Jesus through these Psalms. And in the New Testament, we're going to look at the book of Acts, chapter 22, the whole book. The theme for these two Psalms 34 and 35 is God's deliverance, the righteous protector, and the defender of his people. These two psalms were written during times when David experienced danger, false accusation, and opposition. Yet instead of giving into fear, he praised God for his deliverance and trusted him to bring justice. God's faithfulness, these psalms reveal God's faithfulness to rescue his people, his nearness to the brokenhearted, his justice against evil, and his protection of the righteous. Most importantly, they point us to Jesus, the deliverer, the good shepherd and the righteous defender. Psalms 34, after God rescued him from danger, David praises the Lord for joy with joyful thanksgiving. He invites others, "Oh, taste and see that the Lord is good." And God hears the prayer of the righteous. That's what David teaches. The angels of the Lord surround those who fear him, and the Lord is close to the brokenhearted. God delivers his people from many troubles. David also declares all his bones. He guards all his bones, and not one of them is broken. This verse was fully fulfilled during Jesus' crucifixion. Unlike the two criminals besides him, Jesus' bone was not broken, fulfilling prophecy in John 19, verse 36. Jesus is also the one who welcomes the weary and brokenhearted, offering peace, forgiveness, and hope. Jesus is our deliverer who is near to the brokenhearted and faithfully rescues his people. Psalms 35, David cries out to God because he's falsely accused of being persecuted without a cause. He also asks God to defend him, fight against his enemies, vindicate the innocent. David places justice entirely in God's hand rather than seeking people personal revenge. Jesus was hated without cause, falsely accused, condemned despite his innocence. Yet he trusted himself to the Father, entrusted himself to the Father, and did not retaliate. He is now our advocate who intercedes for us and will one day judge with perfect righteousness. Jesus is our righteousness who fights for his people and brings perfect justice. So basically, God's faithfulness, both these Psalms remind us of following God does not eliminate difficulties. Instead, God's promise is his presence, his protection, his comfort, and his ultimate deliverance. So we as believers trust God even when our circumstances seem overwhelming. What are some of the key takeaways? Jesus is our deliverer. Christ is close to the brokenhearted. Jesus is our righteous defender. God's heart hears. God hears every sincere prayer, and ultimate victory belongs to Christ. Moving over to Acts 22, the theme is a transformed life, bold testimony in God's calling. Uh, chapter 22 records Paul's personal testimony before the hostile crowd in Jerusalem. Instead of defending himself, Paul shares how Jesus completely transformed his life. And these verses reveal the power of personal testimony, God's amazing grace, the transforming work of Christ, courage in sharing the gospel. Uh, in verses 1 to 5, Paul begins by describing his background. He explains that he was a devout Jew, carefully trained under Gamaliel, zealous for God's law, a persecutor of Christians. Paul honestly admits his past without hiding his failures. Jesus delights in transforming broken lives, and no one is beyond his grace. Our past does not define us. Forgiveness does. Right? Jesus specializes in transforming sinners into faithful servants. Verses 6 to 16, Paul recounts how a brilliant light surrounded him on the road to Damascus. He heard the voice of Jesus saying, "Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me?" Blindfolded by the encounter, Paul is into a city where Ananias prays for him. Paul regains his sight, is baptized, and begins his new life in Christ. The risen Jesus personally pursued Paul when he was running in the opposite direction. Salvation begins with God's grace, not human effort. And Jesus still seeks people who are far from Him and offer them new life. Jesus lovingly pursues people and transforms their lives through His grace. Verses 17 to 29, Paul explains that Jesus commissioned him to take the gospel to the Gentiles. When the crowds hear this, they become furious. And despite their rejection, Paul remains faithful to the mission of Christ gave him. Even while under Roman custody, God continues protecting him. Jesus came for all people, Jewish and Gentiles alike. His salvation is offered to everyone, every nation and tribe and language. Believers are called to be faithfully proclaiming this message, regardless of the response. Jesus sends his followers to take the gospel to the whole world. What are some of the key takeaways? Jesus transforms lives completely. Every believer has a testimony. God's grace is greater than our past. Christ calls us boldly to share the gospel, and Jesus protects and guides his servants. Psalms 34 to 35 remind us that Jesus is our deliverer, our defender, and one who stays close to the brokenhearted. Acts 22 reminds us that the same Jesus transformed Paul's life, is transforming every believer's life, and we can use it as our testimony to bring others to faith. So today Jesus invites us to taste and experience his goodness, trust him during seasons of opposition, share our testimony with courage, rest in his protection, and faithfully follow wherever he leads. I hope this encouraged you. Have a wonderful Tuesday. I'll see you tomorrow. God bless you.